I stayed behind over winter break because I told myself I needed the time to focus. Finals had torn through me like wildfire, and my GPA limped away from the semester. So I figured, why not stay? Campus housing was still open for people like me. No distractions. Just me, my books, and the gym. That was the lie I told myself anyway. The truth is, I didn't want to go home. Didn't want to see my dad act like we were friends. Didn't want to sleep in that house again. My roommate had left 3 days ago, and most of the dorm floor was ghost empty by the 20th. By the 23rd, I could count the lights on in the building on one hand. It was December 24th, Christmas Eve, when it started. I woke up at 4:30 a.m. The campus was quiet in that strange way it only gets in winter, like the snow had muffled the very air itself. I layered up, grabbed my bag, and walked through the dark toward the athletic center. No cars, no footsteps, just the crunch of salt and ice under my sneakers. The gym was open 24/7 with card access. I liked being there when it was dead. The metal clang of weights, the hum of the overhead lights. The world shrank down to me, my breath and the iron. It felt pure, honest. And at 5 a.m., I thought I'd have the whole place to myself. But someone else was there. The first thing I noticed when I walked into the weight room was the smell. Not the usual gym funk, but something older, like wet carpet and rust, like mold hiding behind walls. Then I saw him. He was standing in the far corner of the free weight section, motionless, not lifting, not stretching, just standing there, facing a squat rack, dressed in all black, hood up, gloves on. I only saw his side profile, and even that was half hidden by shadows. I stopped. I don't know why he unsettled me right away. Maybe it was the stillness, like he wasn't catching his breath between sets. He was just being still, too still. Or maybe it was the way the lights flickered faintly above him, just a little, as if they couldn't decide whether to illuminate him or not. I coughed, trying to be casual, and walked to a bench on the opposite side. I didn't look at him directly again, just glimpses through the mirrors. He hadn't moved. I warmed up with some dumbbell presses, then went to grab a barbell. The clang of metal filled the space like it always did, but now it echoed weird, like it bounced off the walls wrong, lagged behind a second too long. When I finally glanced back at his corner, he was gone. I froze, barbell halfway loaded, my gut twisted. I scanned the weight room, the mirror, the cardio machines behind me. Nothing. Then a soft thud behind me. I spun. He was at the leg press machine, just there. He hadn't made a sound, didn't walk past me, didn't open a door, just appeared. And now he was sitting, not using the machine, just seated with his arms resting on his knees, staring at the floor. I realized something else then. His shoes, they were off, bare feet on the cold rubber floor. Who the hell works out barefoot at 5 a.m. on Christmas Eve? I considered leaving. I really did. But I told myself I was being dramatic. Maybe he was just weird. Maybe I was tired and paranoid and still half dreaming. So I'd stayed. I put my headphones in, didn't play anything, just used them like armor, and kept lifting. But I never turned my back on him again. I stayed another 30 minutes. The entire time he never touched a weight, never moved. At one point, I looked directly at him for a beat too long, and I swear his head turned slightly toward me, just a fraction of an inch. But that tiny movement made every hair on my arms stand up. I finished early. My body was buzzing, not from the workout, but from adrenaline. I felt watched. Not like someone might be watching me, but like someone was deep inside my skin watching me from the inside. I slung my bag over my shoulder and headed toward the locker rooms. I glanced back once. He was still sitting there. Same position. Still barefoot. Still motionless. I showered in record time. I didn't care about soap or heat or comfort. I just wanted out. The locker room, like everything else on campus, was mostly empty. The lights buzzed overhead, soft and uneven. My locker squeaked when I opened it. It was the only sound in the room, until it wasn't. There was a whisper. I paused. It was so faint I thought it was in my head. But then I heard it again, closer, like someone whispering just around the corner of the tiled wall. Low, croaky, not language, just sound. A hush that rose and fell like it was breathing through words. I grabbed my bag, didn't even finish drying off. My sneakers squelched on the floor as I hurried to the exit. I opened the locker room door, and he was standing just outside it, less than a foot away, facing me. I screamed, or I tried to. My voice caught in my throat like I'd inhaled ice water. I stumbled back. He didn't move. Now I could see his face, or what was under the hood. His skin looked wrong, waxen, pale like freezer burn, eyes dark and sunken, almost lidless, like he didn't blink. No facial expression, just waiting. And then he smiled. It wasn't human. It wasn't even trying to be. That's when the whispering came again, but this time it wasn't behind the walls. It was inside my ears, crawling through them. I don't know how, but I ran, brushed past him. He didn't stop me, just let me pass like a doorman. And I bolted out of the athletic center into the cold morning air. I didn't stop running until I reached my dorm. Back in my dorm room, I slammed the door and locked it, heart jackhammering, lungs seizing up. My wet socks squeaked against the linoleum as I stood there, frozen, staring at the door like he might phase through it, like a bad dream. The silence buzzed around me. I stayed like that for at least 10 minutes, ears straining for any sound in the hallway. Nothing. No footsteps. No voices. Just the faint hum of electricity through dead winter wires. My room felt too dark, too narrow. The shadows in the corners seemed wrong, longer, like they pulsed when I looked directly at them. I grabbed my phone. No messages, no calls. The time read 5:58 a.m. I texted Marcus, my roommate, just to say, "Hey man, you ever seen anyone sketchy in the gym super early, like 4 to 5 a.m.? No reply. Of course not. He was probably still asleep at his parents' place, warm and far away from this dead campus. I turned on every light in the room, then sat on my bed with a hoodie over my damp hair. My skin itched, like something from that guy had clung to me. Static, an echo of whatever he was. I kept hearing that whisper like it was on the edge of hearing, a sound that wasn't a sound, but a pressure in the air. That's when I noticed the smell. It had followed me, like wet rot and iron, faint, but undeniably there. It seeped into my clothes, my backpack, like the scent of that man had attached itself to me. I stripped, tossed everything in a garbage bag, tied it shut, then sat naked on the edge of my bed, shivering and afraid to look at the mirror. I didn't sleep that day. I didn't eat. I just waited for it to fade, but it didn't. That night, I tried to convince myself I'd imagined it, that maybe I had a stress-induced breakdown from being too isolated, too sleep-deprived. Maybe the guy at the gym was just weird, and I let my imagination spiral out of control. But that theory shattered around 9 p.m. when I went to the dorm kitchen to heat up a frozen pizza. There was a note taped to the microwave. Sloppy handwriting. Red ink. "We're the only two here." I dropped the pizza on the floor. I didn't leave the kitchen. I didn't even turn my back to the note. I backed out slowly, eyes wide, breath caught in my throat. I ran back to my room and locked the door. At that point, I considered calling campus security. But what would I say? "Hey, there's a guy who creeped me out at the gym, and now there's a spooky note?" They'd think I was screwing around or having a breakdown. Maybe I was. But I knew that he had been in my building. That note hadn't been there earlier. Someone had been inside, and I hadn't heard a damn thing. Later that night, I finally fell asleep out of pure exhaustion, and I dreamed of the gym. Only it wasn't the gym anymore. It was darker, endless. The weight machines were twisted, rusted things like torture devices. The mats were soaked with black water, and the lights above swung on chains like nooses. And in the dream, I wasn't alone. He was standing behind me, whispering in a language that made my stomach turn. Not because I didn't understand it, but because somehow I did. Words like ancient rot. Words that came with images burned behind my eyelids. When I woke up, I'd bitten through my tongue. Blood was crusted on my pillow. My mouth tasted like pennies. I didn't sleep again. December 25th, Christmas morning. Snow was still falling outside in soft, relentless sheets. The world was blanketed in silence. I should have gone home, should have packed a bag and caught a bus. But something told me that leaving wouldn't matter, that this thing, whatever it was, would follow. Or worse, that it was already inside me. Around noon, I realized I hadn't seen anyone since Christmas Eve. Not a single soul, no maintenance staff, no other residents. It was like the whole campus had been abandoned overnight. I checked the dorm office. Dark. Student center. Locked. Even the dining hall was dark behind the glass, untouched trays still visible on the metal counters. And in the snow outside the athletic center, there were only 2 sets of footprints. One was mine, still visible from the morning before. The other, they didn't have treads. They were bare footprints, human, long. Toes slightly curled, like the foot was dragging with each step. They led to the gym doors, but none led away. I don't know why I went inside. Maybe I had to know. Maybe he wanted me to. The gym was empty. Lights flickered weakly overhead. The same stench as before hit me like a slap. Wet, rust, rot. And there was something new. A third door in the back hallway, past the locker rooms. It hadn't been there before. It was metal, riveted, old. Looked like it belonged in a submarine or a bunker. No handle. Just a circular indentation, like it needed a handprint. The lights above it buzzed violently, blinking in and out, like they were fighting to stay on. I stepped forward, almost in a trance. My hand lifted on its own. When I pressed my palm against the door, the metal was warm, and the door opened. Darkness, total and immediate. Not the kind of dark your eyes adjust to, but a smothering black that felt thick, like it moved when you breathed. I stepped inside. The door shut behind me. I turned, screamed, pounded, but it was seamless now. No hinges, no cracks, just stone and dark. Then the whispers began again. Not one voice, dozens, all overlapping, all just behind my ears, moaning, pleading, some laughing. One whisper, deep and distant, kept saying, "Now you know what we are." I stumbled forward. The ground sloped downward. My feet found metal stairs, narrow and slick with something warm. As I descended, shapes began to take form in the darkness. People. Number, not people. Shells of people. Gaunt things with eyes sewn shut, mouths yawning too wide, teeth missing or filed to nubs, muscles twitching like something lived under their skin. They were curled in corners, hanging from racks, pinned under weights. Some still whispered, some were weeping, some just watched with blind, pulsing eyes. And at the bottom of the stairs, in a circular pit of iron and bones, stood him. He wasn't wearing his hood anymore. His face had no features, no eyes, no mouth, just skin stretched smooth over bone. But I knew he was looking at me. He stepped forward, and even without a mouth, I heard his voice inside me. "You brought yourself here." I ran up those stairs, slipping, cutting my hands on rusted railings. I screamed until my throat bled. I slammed my fists on the door until finally it opened. When I stumbled out, it was dark outside. The clock in the hallway read 11:59 p.m. I limped through the snow back to my dorm. My door was wide open. Inside, the lights were off. And written on the wall above my bed, in something dark and dripping, were the words, "We're the only two here." My phone was gone, my keys, my wallet. All that remained was a pair of black gloves and a note. "It's your turn now." I never thought I'd agree to a blind date that started at 4:45 in the morning. But there I was, bleary-eyed, dragging my feet through the icy December dark toward the gym's side entrance. The place looked abandoned, its massive glass panes reflecting the dull amber of the parking lot lights. I stuffed my hands in my hoodie, breath fogging in the cold. Not a single other car was in the lot. Just mine. Just hers. We met online, of all places, in a fitness app's chat room. Her name was Lila. Her profile picture was almost too perfect. Smooth olive skin, raven black hair, those high cheekbones, and emerald eyes that had a kind of pressure behind them, like they could push through a screen. But her messages weren't the typical flirt bait crap. She was smart, intense. She talked about routines, discipline, desire. It all felt electric. Then she asked me something odd. "Would you want to meet at the gym before it opens? I have a key." "That's unconventional," I replied. "I like to start my relationships with a shared sweat," she wrote. "Let's see what you've got before sunrise." I laughed it off at first, but something about her tone made me agree. I thought I was being spontaneous, brave, edgy even, stupid. The gym was a private, locally owned place. I had a membership, but I usually went in the evenings. It was strange seeing it like this, dim, quiet, dead. The overhead fluorescents weren't on yet. Only a few emergency lights cast a ghostly glow over the rows of machines and racks of weights. I pushed through the side door. The soft beep of the magnetic lock greeted me. And then, her, standing in the middle of the free weights section like she'd been waiting for me forever. She was even more stunning in person. Skin like warm marble, dressed in all black, tight leggings, sleeveless crop top, and fingerless gloves. Her eyes practically shimmered in the dark, catching what little light there was and throwing it back like a cat's. "Hey," I said, trying to sound casual, but suddenly aware of how empty the place was. "Hey yourself," she said, walking toward me, her hips swaying like a metronome, keeping time to some silent rhythm. "You came. You really do work out this early?" "I don't sleep," she whispered, grinning. I laughed, unsure if it was a joke. "Right." We started with warm-ups, jump ropes, a few stretches. She led. I followed. Her movements were fluid, unnaturally graceful. Her muscles didn't twitch. Her breath never quickened. She didn't even break a sweat. After a few minutes, she looked at me and said, "Let's get primal." She moved to the squat rack, loaded it with way too much weight for her frame, and dropped into a perfect set. No strain, no struggle, just smooth, controlled strength. I caught myself staring. "Your turn," she said. "I'll lighten it," I muttered. "No," she said. Her voice was low, but sharp. "Try it. I want to see you push." I should have said no. I knew I should have. But something about the way she stared at me made resistance feel like surrender. Not in the fun way, in the terrifying, I'm in too deep way. So I got under the bar. I lifted, and my body screamed. I could barely stand, and when I lowered into the squat, I felt something tear in my back. I dropped the weight with a crash. The sound exploded through the gym. I hit the ground hard, groaning. Jesus, what the hell? When I looked up, she wasn't there. The lights flickered, and suddenly, she was behind me. Close, too close. "You're strong," she said. "Stronger than most." I like that. She crouched beside me. I felt her breath on my neck, cold, impossibly cold. I tried to stand, but my legs didn't want to move. Pain lanced up my spine. What are you?" I stammered. She leaned closer, her lips brushing my ear. "Hungry." Then she changed. Her skin darkened to a violet hue, as if shadows were crawling over her. Her eyes turned black, no whites, just obsidian pools. Her hair moved like it was underwater, floating around her head. When she opened her mouth, her teeth were too sharp, too many. And I couldn't look away. I couldn't even blink. She climbed onto my lap, straddling me, and pressed her hands against my chest. A rush of heat flooded my body. My heart was beating too fast, like it wanted to punch out of my ribs. "I only take what's offered," she said, mock sweet. "And you, darling, came to me." Her fingers pressed harder, and suddenly it felt like something inside me was being pulled out through my skin, memories, thoughts, energy. My limbs twitched. I gasped. The world went dim around the edges. I remembered flashes, my mom's voice on the phone, my old dog, the smell of coffee in the morning, and each one faded as she drew it out of me. "Stop," I begged, voice cracking. "Please." Her eyes fluttered. She looked intoxicated. "You're delicious." I don't know how long it went on. Time bent in that place, twisted like her body as it writhed above me. Then, a loud clang. The front doors burst open. A beam of a flashlight cut across the gym. "Hello?" a man's voice barked. "Security." Lila shrieked, not a sound a human throat could make. It was high and sharp, like metal tearing, and she was gone. Just gone. I was left on the ground, body aching, drenched in cold sweat. They took me to the hospital, said it was a seizure, overexertion, maybe dehydration. I didn't argue. I never went back to that gym, never used that app again. But sometimes, when I'm falling asleep, I hear her whisper in the dark behind my eyes. I only take what's offered. And I wonder how much of me is left. There's a strange kind of silence that settles over the world at 4 a.m. It's not peace. It's not quiet in the comforting sense. It's the type of silence that makes you feel like you're trespassing, like you've slipped into a time slot not meant for the living. I started doing early morning workouts after a breakup left me sleepless. She took the bed, the couch, and the dog, so I took up insomnia and deadlifts. I figured if I wasn't going to sleep, I might as well suffer productively. The gym I went to was one of those 24-hour franchise places. Iron Pulse. Neon blue logo, fingerprint scanner at the door, cameras on every corner to keep weirdos in check. But weirdos weren't the problem at that hour. I was always the only one there. Always. At least, I used to think so. It was a Wednesday morning when things started to feel off. I remember because Tuesday night had been brutal. Couldn't shut my eyes for more than a few minutes without picturing my ex's face, cold and disappointed, the way she looked when she left. So, I rolled out of bed around 3:30, chugged a stale pre-workout that tasted like melted battery acid, and drove the 15 minutes to Iron Pulse, windows cracked to keep me awake. When I scanned my finger at the door, the little machine chirped and clicked open. Same as usual. Same antiseptic smell when I walked in. Rubber mats, sweat, and disinfectant. But the moment I stepped inside, I felt it. The air was heavier, like the ventilation system was off or the oxygen had been sucked out. I chalked it up to sleep deprivation and started my warm-up. 10 minutes on the treadmill, jogging in place, staring at my reflection in the mirror across the room. My eyes looked sunken, pale. The fluorescent lights overhead buzzed slightly, but that wasn't new. What was new was the flicker. Every 30 seconds or so, one of the lights down near the free weights would stutter, like it was trying to blink something out of view. After my warm-up, I headed toward the squat rack, and that's when I noticed it. There was a water bottle on the ground near the leg press machine, one of those big plastic gallon jugs the meatheads carry around, half full, beads of condensation still fresh on the outside. Someone else was here. "Hello?" I called out, feeling stupid the moment the word left my mouth. My voice echoed, bouncing back like it had nowhere to land. No answer. I walked over to the bottle, looked around. The showers were down the hall to the left. Locker room was dark. So was the yoga studio. The manager's office was locked, and the security cameras blinked quietly in the corners, their little red lights pulsing like digital heartbeats. I chalked the bottle up to someone leaving it behind and got on with my workout. Loaded up the bar, went in for my first set of squats. I was halfway through the second set when I heard it. A grunt. Deep, guttural, human, but not quite. It came from behind the cable machine near the back wall. I froze, the barbell heavy across my shoulders, heart thumping loud enough to drown out the gym music playing softly overhead. "Someone back there?" I asked, panting, voice dry. No reply. I re-racked the weight and walked over slowly. I could feel the adrenaline kicking in, fight or flight sharpening my senses, making the hairs on my arms stand up. The cable machine was empty, but the mirrors told another story. There was a smudge on the surface, a long, greasy handprint sliding down the glass as if someone had pressed their palm against it and dragged it slowly toward the floor. I touched it, still wet. I backed away. Okay, maybe someone was here. Maybe they were messing with me. Or maybe it was nothing. A janitor? Another insomniac lifter? One of the weirdos who wandered in off the street sometimes? I turned toward the cardio section, intending to do something light to cool off, try to reset my nerves. But when I looked toward the treadmills, I saw it. The figure. It was standing near the vending machine, just beyond the row of elliptical trainers, not moving, not breathing, just watching me. I blinked. It was gone. I spun around, scanning the room. Nothing, nobody. Just my reflection again, and the low hum of fluorescent lights. I was rattled, enough to consider calling it a day. But pride's a funny thing. I'd already skipped Monday, and if I let myself give in to phantom shadows and weird noises, I knew I'd never come back. And I needed this routine, this pain. It kept me grounded. I put on my headphones, turned the volume up, and hit the bench press. 3 sets in, I forgot about the figure, forgot about the handprint. I was focused on form, breathing, the satisfying burn in my chest. And then, wham! Something slammed into the glass door at the front of the gym. I dropped the bar. It bounced off the rack and hit the floor with a metallic clang that echoed off the walls. Heart pounding, I stood up, staring across the room. The door was empty. No one outside, no one inside. Just that echo, and the faint shimmer of something wet on the glass, like breath or fog or blood. I didn't walk toward it. I ran. I reached the front, pressed my hand against the cool glass. A smear, faint, oily, almost black. I peered outside. Still nothing. The parking lot was a void, one flickering lamppost, my shitty car sitting alone, and the far-off hum of a delivery truck somewhere in the distance. I checked my watch. 4:28 a.m., just 32 minutes. That was all it had been. That's when I decided to go. Grabbed my keys, towel, gym bag, didn't even wipe the bench down. But as I turned toward the exit, ready to pull the door open, I saw something in the reflection behind me, not on the floor, on the ceiling. Something was crawling above the dumbbell racks. Spindly limbs stretched out, spider-like, pale, wet. Its head turned too fast, and its face was all wrong. Elongated, grinning, no eyes, just dark pits. I spun around, heart clawing at my ribs. Nothing, just the gym, just weights and mats and polished floors. But the mirror still showed it, hanging there, still, watching. I backed away slowly, turned toward the door, and the mirror blinked. Not me. I stood frozen, staring at the mirror that no longer matched reality. My reflection wasn't mine anymore. Not fully. The thing on the ceiling behind me was still there, though when I turned to look directly, there was nothing. Just clean tiles and a busted fluorescent bulb. But in the mirror, it writhed. Its limbs were too long, the joints bent wrong. Like elbows folding backward, arms too thin, fingers stretching like ropes. It clung to the ceiling like an insect, but its skin was translucent, wet. Veins pulsed faintly beneath it, twitching like something electrical lived beneath the surface. It was smiling at me, not the smile of something that can smile, the smile of something that learned to do it. I couldn't move. I couldn't blink. My breath was shallow, heartbeat fast and rabbit-like. The silence around me thickened, soundproof, suffocating. The whir of the treadmill was gone. The faint gym music had stopped. All I could hear was my own blood in my ears. And then, splat. Something wet hit the floor behind me. I turned. There, just in front of the dumbbells, was a handprint. A slick, glistening smear like something had dropped out of thin air. It shimmered faintly under the overhead lights, black, syrupy, like oil. It hadn't been there a second ago. I backed up. My hand found the front door, and I yanked. Locked. No, it wasn't locked. The sensor just didn't register me. The green light didn't flicker. I pounded the glass with my fist, nothing. I looked around for the emergency exit in the back hallway, the one that always had that little red glow above it. Dark. No red light. No hallway either. What the hell? I walked back that way and stopped short. Where the hallway should have been, the path to the locker room, showers, and that busted-ass vending machine that never worked, there was only wall. Smooth, gray, unbroken wall. As if the space had never existed. I turned around. The layout of the gym was wrong now. It wasn't subtle, like things moved or shifted. It was rewritten. Machines weren't where I left them. The Smith machine was gone. In its place was an old, rusted pull-up bar bolted to the floor. Dumbbells were no longer modern chrome, but iron hex weights with worn-down rubber. Some looked half-melted. The carpet, where there had been rubberized gym matting, was now frayed green turf, stained in places with black marks that looked a lot like dried blood. My voice cracked when I said, "Is anyone here?" A sound answered. A laugh from the mirror. It didn't come from the walls or the air. It came from the reflection itself. The mirrored surface shimmered like a disturbed pond. In its warped surface, the ceiling thing still clung there, grinning, shifting its limbs. Its mouth moved again, this time words, but it didn't speak with a voice. The sound came from inside my skull, like a migraine speaking. "You come here to lift the weight." I staggered back. What the fuck? The weight never leaves. I couldn't breathe. My legs moved before my brain caught up, and I sprinted across the room toward the emergency panel behind the front desk. There was always a manual override button back there, something to unlock the doors in case of a fire or power outage. But the desk was gone. In its place, a pit. No, not a hole in the floor, a pit in the reflection. The floor was still solid beneath my feet, but in the mirror, the desk had collapsed into a chasm. A black void opened like a mouth, wide and jagged. I could see movement in it, limbs twitching in the dark, something crawling upward. I turned away. I didn't know where I was anymore. Not really. It looked like my gym, but it felt like a memory of it. Rotting, hollowed out. The colors were wrong. The lights were too dim. The shadows too deep. Something moved past the far weight rack. A flash of skin. Hair? No. Teeth. Teeth where they shouldn't be. I ducked behind a squat cage and tried to quiet my breathing. That's when I noticed the mirrors weren't matching me anymore. My reflection was just standing there, in the middle of the room, not hiding, not panicking, just staring at where I was, watching me from the other side of the glass. And behind him, in the mirror, were others. Dozens of figures, some half-formed, some clearly human at one point. But others were wrong, like they'd started as people and had been lifted into something else. All limbs and open mouths, bent knees facing backward, skin drawn tight like butcher paper. One of them was doing curls. Another one was hanging from the pull-up bar with no head. A third was dragging a barbell across the floor, leaving a thick red groove. I turned away. I ran. I tried to run through the walls if I had to, any way out, even if it meant breaking bones. But the gym just kept going. The more I moved, the more space appeared. Row after row of weight machines, leg extensions, cable crossovers, preacher curl benches that hadn't been there before. A forest of iron, but all of it old, covered in dust and blood and fingerprints. I saw a lat pull-down machine with something tied to it. At first, I thought it was a resistance band. It wasn't. It was a tongue, still wet, still twitching. Something crashed behind me. I whirled around and saw the ceiling thing drop to the floor in the mirror, not in real life. In the mirror, it stood upright now, easily 7 feet tall, hunched, its spine poking out like a row of knives beneath its pale skin. It cocked its head and grinned. And then it stepped out of the mirror, right out, like the glass was just water. It didn't make a sound, not when it landed, not when it moved. It walked like it had never stopped walking, and it was coming straight for me. I screamed, didn't care how pathetic I sounded. I grabbed the nearest thing I could find, a 45-pound plate, and threw it. The mirror shattered, not cracked, exploded. Like a bomb went off in the glass. Shards flew everywhere. The thing howled, shrieked, a high metallic noise like a microphone feeding back underwater. It clutched its head and staggered, the broken reflection warping around it like smoke. And in that moment, the emergency lights flicked on. Red glow, just for a second, but enough to show me the back hallway had returned. I ran like hell. Down the hallway, past the locker rooms, past the broken vending machine now sparking and twitching. I slammed into the emergency exit door and pushed. It opened. It fucking opened. I burst outside into cold, humid air. The parking lot was real again, streetlights glowing orange. My car waiting. The world made of normal shadows and silence again. But when I looked back, Iron Pulse was dark, like no one had ever been there. Windows black. No lights. No doors. Just a long, empty strip of concrete and darkness behind glass.